I'm Lucas. Civil engineer, 43, married to Marissa for 10 years. When I married her, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. She was gorgeous, smart, had this sharp wit that kept me on my toes. I worked hard to build a good life for us, you know? We weren't rolling in it, but we were doing well enough. Nice house, decent cars, vacations every now and then. I thought we had it all. But lately, things have felt different. It's like I'm living with a stranger. Marissa's gotten obsessed with working out, and I mean obsessed. She was never really into the gym before, but about 6 months ago, she hired herself a trainer, this guy named Ryder. You can picture him, cocky, built like he spends every waking minute lifting, that constant, I just finished a marathon energy. Not my type, but clearly hers these days. At first I thought, okay, good for her. She's taking care of herself, right? But the gym sessions kept getting longer. Then it was twice a week, then 4 times, then every single day. And each time, she'd come back looking. I don't know how to explain it. She'd come back glowing, but not in a good workout kind of way, more like she'd just come back from a date. Then there were her little habits that started changing. She'd take her phone with her everywhere, like literally couldn't be without it, and it was always face down. Used to be, we'd watch TV together after dinner, but she'd just scroll through her phone, laughing at messages she couldn't share, or replying with those little smirks that she'd try to hide. So one night, I worked up the courage to bring it up. I asked her what was going on, why she was spending so much time with Ryder. And she just brushed me off with this casual, "Lucas, don't be insecure. It's just a workout. Maybe you should try it sometime." That stung, like she was already positioning herself on some higher ground. But fine, I let it slide. But it didn't stop there. The late nights started piling up. She'd say she was going out with the girls, but never had a single photo to prove it. I'd be home, staring at the clock, wondering what was really going on, feeling like some kind of pathetic fool. And maybe that's exactly what I was. So I decided to get some answers. I wasn't just going to sit around waiting to be made a fool. I'd worked too hard to let everything slip through my fingers. So I got tracking software for her phone, hidden cameras for the house, even went as far as hiring a private investigator. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, but every sign was there. I had to know the truth, no matter how bad it might be. 2 weeks in, and I was already piecing together a puzzle I didn't want to see. The PI's updates started to paint a clear picture. Marissa wasn't just going to the gym or grabbing drinks with the girls. I'd get photos sent over, and they'd show her car parked at odd places, high-end lounges, trendy rooftops, even outside Ryder's apartment a few times. The evidence was stacking up, and every time I looked, that gut feeling got heavier. One night, after she came home from a late client meeting, I decided to ask her how her day went, just to see if she'd be straight with me. She barely looked up from her phone, tossed out some quick excuse about being swamped with work, and brushed off my questions like I was just another item on her to-do list. "Why all the questions, Lucas? You sound jealous." She said it with this little smirk, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Jealous? Maybe I'm just wondering why I hardly see you anymore," I shot back, trying to keep my voice even. She rolled her eyes, like I was the one acting crazy. "Don't be dramatic. You've always been the busy one, Lucas. Now I have my own things going on, and you can't handle it." She grabbed her phone, walked out of the room, and shut the bedroom door behind her. Just like that. After that night, I noticed how quickly she'd change whenever Ryder's name came up, like it was this switch she could flip on and off. A few times, she'd cancel plans we'd made because Ryder was running a late session. Then on the weekends, she'd leave earlier in the morning and get home late, saying they'd grabbed smoothies or hit the sauna. But it didn't add up. I'd never seen her like this distant, this full of excuses. The real kicker came a week later. I got an alert from the tracking software I'd installed on her phone. It showed her location just a few blocks from the house, but not at a restaurant or gym. She was at a hotel. I remember just sitting there, staring at my phone, my blood boiling. She came home that night acting like nothing had happened, all smiles and, "Hey babe, sorry I'm late." And I couldn't stand it. I knew she'd been out there with him, but I kept it together. Barely. A couple of days later, I decided I was done waiting. If she wasn't going to come clean, I'd make sure she didn't have a choice. That night, after she waltzed in like everything was fine, I stayed up in the dark, staring at the ceiling, running through every excuse she'd given me over the past few months. I'd replay her excuses in my head, over and over, looking for any angle where they could have been legit. But each one only sounded worse, like layers of a story she'd rehearsed. And then I thought, if she's hiding this, she's going to slip up sooner or later. I called the PI the next day and asked him to stay on her tail every day that week. I didn't just want hints or photos of her car at random spots. I wanted irrefutable, straight-up proof. Meanwhile, I started prepping, just in case this all led to the big reveal. I reviewed our finances, made sure I had everything in order. Half of our assets were under my name anyway, so I wasn't about to get taken for a fool financially either. If Marissa was pulling this, I'd be ready. On the third day, the PI sent over a bombshell. Marissa hadn't just met up with Ryder at his apartment or some high-end bar. She'd been at a spa resort about an hour out of town. There she was, clear as day, holding his hand as they checked in. They looked like any other couple, completely casual, without a single care in the world. I could barely look at the photos without feeling sick. But I knew that just seeing her in those pictures wasn't going to be enough for what I had planned. I wanted her to face this, without any way out, no more excuses or dodges. So I kept quiet, didn't let her see that I knew. And on Saturday, when she left with the same flimsy, just running some errands line, I watched her pull out of the driveway and then drove straight to the electronics store. Bought a few hidden cameras, stuff small enough that she'd never notice. By the end of that day, I'd set up cameras in the living room, by the door, and even in our bedroom. She had no clue, and I planned to keep it that way. If she tried bringing him anywhere near my house, there'd be no hiding it. The cameras gave me a small sense of control back, something to hold on to. Sunday came, and I was on edge all day, checking my phone every hour. By evening, she still hadn't come home, and I was fuming. Around 8 p.m., she strolled in, no explanations, no apologies. Just gave me that same smirk and went straight to the shower. I was done being patient. I wanted the confrontation, but I could tell she'd still play it off, make me look like the insecure husband she kept hinting I was. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time. With the cameras rolling and the PI on standby, I was ready. So I kept my cool, waiting for the right moment, knowing it was coming. And it came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, Marissa was leaving for another girls' night out. By now, I knew exactly what that meant, and I could barely hold back my frustration. But I forced myself to act normal, kissed her goodbye, and told her to have fun. She gave me this look, almost like she was daring me to say something. But I didn't. I just watched her walk out the door, waited a few minutes, then checked the cameras. I saw her get into her car, take a left down the street, and then pause at the corner. She sat there for a minute before pulling over. Another car rolled up right behind her, Ryder's black Mustang. I watched as he got out, leaned into her window, and they talked for a bit, laughing like they had no cares in the world. Then he got in her car, and they drove off together. By now, I had all the proof I needed. I had enough pictures, enough videos. I could have gone straight to a lawyer and put the whole thing in motion. But I wasn't ready to end it there. I wanted her to know exactly what I knew, to feel the same gut punch she'd been dealing me for months. That Friday, there was a company party Marissa had been talking about for weeks. It was a big deal, some event she'd helped organize, and she'd made it clear that my presence was expected. In the past, I'd go along, play the supportive husband role. This time, I had other plans. When the night came, she dressed up like she was auditioning for a Hollywood premiere. Black dress, bold lipstick, the whole 9 yards. She didn't even ask if I was ready, just assumed I'd be along for the ride, like always. But as she was getting ready to leave, I stopped her in the doorway. "Actually, I'll meet you there," I said, holding back a grin. She looked surprised, but nodded, a bit too quickly. "Sure, Lucas. Don't be too late." And with that, she was gone. An hour later, I walked into the party, acting casual, keeping my distance. I spotted her with her colleagues, smiling and laughing like nothing was wrong. Ryder was there too, lurking in the corner, trying to keep a low profile but not quite pulling it off. The way he looked at her. I almost lost it then and there. But I held back, waiting for the right moment. Finally, about an hour in, I went up to her. "Hey Marissa, mind if we talk for a sec?" She looked startled, almost nervous. Sure Lucas. What's up?" I took a deep breath, loud enough for the people around us to hear. Funny thing, I thought we were past the point of lying in this marriage. But here we are. Maybe you'd like to introduce Ryder here to everyone as more than just your trainer. Her face went pale, and the whole room got quiet. The silence in the room was deafening. Marissa looked around, eyes wide, like she was scrambling for an escape. Ryder shifted uncomfortably, clearly thrown off by me calling him out in front of her entire circle. For once, he didn't have that smug look plastered on his face. "Oh, come on, Lucas," she finally said, her voice trying to sound casual but cracking just enough. "This isn't the time or place for whatever you think is happening." I could feel every eye in the room on us, watching the perfect couple suddenly unravel. I crossed my arms, holding her gaze. "Not the time. Marissa, I think it's exactly the time. Everyone here knows Ryder as your trainer, right? Because as far as I can tell, he's been giving you a lot more than workout tips." A murmur went through the crowd, people exchanging looks, trying to make sense of what was happening. I could see the color drain from her face, her carefully crafted confidence slipping away. Ryder finally spoke up, his voice low but defensive. "Listen, man, you don't know what you're talking about. This isn't the place for." I cut him off, stepping closer. "You think I don't know? You think I haven't been watching the two of you for months?" I practically spat the words, feeling every ounce of the anger I'd been holding back. "I've got pictures, videos, timestamps, everything. So go ahead, tell me I'm wrong." Marissa's face twisted in something halfway between anger and fear, but mostly shock. She hadn't expected this. She'd probably never even considered the possibility that I'd find out, let alone confront her in front of everyone. Her hands shook as she fumbled for words, but I wasn't done. "You know, Marissa, you made it real easy for me," I said, my voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "All those lies, the sneaking around, the late nights at the gym. You didn't even try to hide it. And now you're here with the guy, in front of everyone, still lying." She finally managed to speak, her voice brittle. "Lucas, stop. You're making a scene." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'm making a scene? I think that's rich, coming from someone who brought her affair partner to a work event like this. You're the one who didn't have the decency to keep it out of our lives." At that, Ryder took a step toward me, a flash of anger in his eyes. "Man, let's take this outside." I shook my head. "No, Ryder. We'll settle this right here. You didn't mind humiliating me in private, so why not go public now?" For a moment, it looked like he'd take a swing. But he held back, probably sensing the crowd's attention, knowing how bad it would look for him to make a scene at Marissa's work event. I watched him swallow his pride, step back, and glare at Marissa, as if blaming her for the whole mess. Marissa finally snapped, turning to me with a look of pure defiance. "You know what? Fine. Yes, Lucas. I deserve freedom, a life outside of the one you've kept me trapped in. Maybe if you weren't so busy with work, you'd have noticed that sooner." I didn't say a word, just watched as the crowd reacted, her colleagues looking at her with a mix of surprise and disgust. She tried to keep her head up, but I could see her confidence crumble with every passing second. And just like that, I turned and walked away, leaving her and Ryder to deal with the mess they'd made. It was only the beginning. The drive home was a blur. Part of me felt like I should be rattled, shaking something. But all I felt was a strange calm, like I'd finally let go of a weight I'd been carrying for months. Marissa hadn't even tried to deny it. She'd thrown out some excuse about freedom and a life outside of me, but there it was, she'd admitted it in front of her entire professional circle. I got home, poured myself a drink, and sat down, just letting the silence sink in. My phone buzzed on the table, and I saw a text from Marissa. The words blurred as I stared at them. "Lucas, let's talk. You had no right to humiliate me like that." I laughed out loud, a bitter sound in the empty room. I had no right? After everything she'd done, she was angry at me for calling her out? I ignored the message and focused on the next step. I'd already spoken to a lawyer in the weeks leading up to this. We'd gone over all the financials, everything I needed to freeze her access to our accounts and keep the house under my name. It was all ready to go, I just had to pull the trigger. And that's exactly what I did. I called my lawyer first thing the next morning, told him to get the ball rolling on the divorce papers, and to initiate the freeze on our shared accounts. He assured me it'd be done by the end of the day. Knowing Marissa, it wouldn't be long before she realized what was happening, and I wasn't about to make it easy for her. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting in my office when my phone rang. It was Marissa. I let it go to voicemail, and a minute later, the voicemail notification popped up. I knew exactly what it would say. I almost didn't listen, but then hit play out of curiosity. "Lucas, what the hell is going on?" Her voice was sharp, angry. "My cards aren't working. Did you do this? Are you really going to make this harder than it already is? I get it, you're hurt, you're angry, but freezing me out like this? It's petty. Call me back." Petty. That's what she called it. Not once did she sound apologetic or remorseful. She wasn't upset that she'd betrayed me, she was upset because she couldn't access the money. By the end of the day, I'd gotten another half-dozen calls and texts from her, each one angrier than the last. When I finally got home, I saw her car parked outside, like she'd been waiting for me. I sighed, bracing myself for the inevitable showdown as I stepped out of the car. She stormed up to me, barely giving me a chance to shut the door. "Lucas, this is insane. You're shutting me out of everything? You can't do that." I crossed my arms, meeting her gaze without a flicker. "Actually, I can. And I did. You made your choice, Marissa. Now you can live with it." She scoffed, crossing her arms right back, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "You're really going to ruin me over this? You're acting like a child." "Funny," I said coldly. "You didn't seem to mind ruining our marriage, and now I'm the childish one?" She started to argue, her voice loud and defiant, but I didn't let her. "I've got nothing more to say, Marissa. You had your freedom. Now it's my turn." With that, I walked into the house, locked the door behind me, and left her standing outside. I didn't look back. It felt like finally, after all those months of doubt and anger, I was in control again. This was only the start, but at least now I knew exactly where we were headed. The days after that confrontation felt like stepping into a new life. Every morning, I'd wake up in a strangely quiet house, half expecting to see Marissa walk in with some excuse, expecting to hear her voice ring through the rooms. But there was just silence. I'd filed for divorce by then, and my lawyer had sent her the papers. Marissa tried calling the first few days, leaving voicemails ranging from angry demands to desperate attempts at bargaining. She'd gone from calling me petty to cruel to claiming she'd explain everything if I just gave her a chance. It was like watching someone go through every stage of denial in real time, and none of it was remorse. Not once did she apologize. Then, about a week later, I got a call from the PI. He'd kept following Marissa and Ryder at my request, gathering whatever evidence might be useful in court. This time, he sounded almost uncomfortable, like he didn't want to give me the update. "Lucas," he said, "you're not going to believe this. Ryder was with another woman. Looks like he's been seeing her on the side, just like he was seeing Marissa." I sat there, digesting the irony of it. Marissa had thrown everything away for this guy, and now he was out there betraying her just as easily. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly, but there was a strange sense of justice. Maybe now she'd get a taste of the mess she'd put me through. That evening, Marissa showed up at the house again, but this time she looked different. Gone was the defiant, angry Marissa from before. She looked tired, almost fragile, her makeup smudged, her hair tied back loosely. She'd been crying, that much was clear. When I opened the door, she didn't try to barge in this time. She just stood there, looking at me with a defeated expression. "Lucas," she said softly, "can we talk? Please." I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my expression steady. "About what, Marissa? What's left to say?" She swallowed, looking down at her feet, then back up at me, her voice shaking. "Ryder, he's been seeing someone else. All this time. I didn't know. I thought it was real with him." I could see the pain in her eyes, but it barely registered. "Is that supposed to make me feel bad for you?" "No, Lucas, I was wrong, okay?" She took a deep breath, then continued, "I don't know what I was thinking. I threw everything away, and now it's gone." I didn't respond. She went on, her voice breaking, "I thought he cared about me. And I know that doesn't change anything. I know I hurt you. But please, don't throw me away like this. Not like this." I shook my head, the anger I'd felt for months rising again. "Marissa, you threw me away the second you chose him. You threw us away. And now that you realize he's not what you thought, you expect me to just forget everything." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She knew there was nothing she could say to erase the betrayal. After a long pause, she nodded, a few tears slipping down her face. "I get it," she whispered. I really do. I don't know how to fix this. Marissa, some things can't be fixed, I replied, my voice steady. Sometimes, you just have to live with the choices you made. She stood there for a moment, defeated, before finally nodding and turning away, her shoulders slumped. I watched as she walked back to her car, and for the first time since this whole thing began, I felt something close to pity. But I didn't call her back. I'd given her enough chances, and she'd shown me exactly who she was. After that night, Marissa's visits stopped. She'd realized, finally, that I was done. There was no apology that could undo what she'd done, and she knew it. I thought maybe she'd stay out of my life for good now, lick her wounds somewhere else and let me move on. But of course, things didn't stay quiet for long. A few days later, I started hearing from mutual friends. Marissa had started talking, telling her side of the story. She'd gone around saying I'd overreacted, that I was controlling, and that she'd only been seeking a little freedom. Apparently, she was painting me as the jealous husband who'd forced her into Ryder's arms. It was incredible, the lengths she'd go to save face. And her story found a sympathetic ear with a few of our friends, mostly people I barely knew. Some of them even reached out, telling me I should hear her out, that every marriage has its issues. I laughed, reading those messages. Sure, every marriage has issues, but not every marriage has lies, cheating, and public humiliation. Then, it escalated. I found out that she'd gone to her boss and claimed I'd created an unsafe environment at the company party by confronting her and Ryder in front of everyone. She spun it like I'd lost my mind, harassing her out of the blue. She even threatened to file a complaint if she felt unsafe around me in public again. That was the last straw. I wasn't going to sit around while she tried to ruin my reputation. I went to my lawyer and asked him to draft a public statement, something clean but direct. I wanted people to know what had really happened, especially since she was twisting the story to make herself look like the victim. But my lawyer advised against it. Lucas, he said, the best revenge is letting her self-destruct. Trust me, someone who goes to these lengths won't be able to keep up the act forever. People will see her for who she is. I didn't like it, but I listened. I stayed quiet, didn't reply to her lies, didn't send any messages. But it was hard, knowing she was out there, poisoning everything. A week later, my silence paid off. I started getting messages from friends who'd initially believed her. Apparently, Marissa's story had holes. She'd claimed she'd been unhappy for years, yet everyone knew she'd been bragging about our life to anyone who'd listen. And Ryder? He'd been caught flirting with another woman, and someone from Marissa's work saw him leaving a bar with her late one night. The sympathy for Marissa started drying up. And I didn't have to say a word. One evening, I went to grab a beer with a close friend, Aaron. He'd been there from the beginning, one of the few who knew the whole story. As we clinked glasses, he grinned. "Guess who's trying to come back to the friend group?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Let me guess," I replied, not needing to hear it. He laughed. "Oh yeah. Apparently, Ryder's not such a perfect match after all." I shrugged, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. Marissa was getting a taste of her own medicine, and I didn't have to lift a finger. All I'd had to do was wait. With the public fallout piling up around Marissa, I thought maybe I could finally get some peace. But as expected, she wasn't about to let go of the life we'd built without a fight. A few days after I'd heard about her trying to claw her way back into our social circle, I got a call from my lawyer. "Lucas, Marissa's attorney reached out," he said. "She's looking to contest the divorce terms. She wants a larger portion of your assets, arguing that her lifestyle depends on it." I laughed, a bitter sound even to my own ears. It wasn't enough that she'd betrayed me, she wanted to take everything she could on her way out. I told my lawyer to proceed with every legal safeguard we'd set up, from the frozen accounts to protecting my personal assets and property. And then I dug in. I started pulling every shred of evidence together, financial records, messages, all the logs from the tracking app. I was going to make sure Marissa had no leg to stand on. If she wanted to drag this into court, I'd give her a front row seat to the truth. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, who assured me it would help solidify my case. Meanwhile, Marissa started pushing harder. She was fighting for alimony, claiming she couldn't maintain her lifestyle on her own. The irony was almost laughable. She hadn't thought twice about that lifestyle when she was sneaking off with Ryder. The court date was set for a few weeks later, and Marissa kept trying to get me to settle, sending messages about how we could avoid all this drama and just come to a mutual agreement. But I knew what that meant. She wanted me to give in, hand over more than she deserved, and let her walk away unscathed. I ignored her messages, focused on the case, and made it clear to her lawyer that I wasn't budging. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom ready. I had everything laid out, her admissions in text messages, the photos, the financial evidence showing she'd been hiding her expenses with Ryder. Marissa showed up looking polished, but her face was tight with worry. She knew I had her backed into a corner. My lawyer presented the evidence methodically, and with each new piece, I saw Marissa's composure slip. By the end, she looked like she could barely hold herself together. Her lawyer tried to paint her as someone who'd fallen out of love and was just looking for a fresh start, but it fell flat. The evidence was too solid, too damning. The judge ruled in my favor, denying her claims for increased alimony and giving her the minimum settlement possible. She was furious, but there was nothing she could do. She'd lost, and she knew it. Afterward, she tried to talk to me outside the courtroom, her voice desperate. "Lucas, this isn't fair. You can't just throw me away like this. We had a life together." I looked her straight in the eye, my voice steady. "You threw it away, Marissa. I just finished what you started." And with that, I turned and walked away. The chapter was closed, and for the first time, I felt like I could finally move forward. With the divorce finalized, my life was mine again. I thought there'd be some big, overwhelming sense of relief or satisfaction, but honestly, all I felt was exhausted. Months of betrayal, anger, and court battles. It was like I'd run a marathon, and I'd only now crossed the finish line. But slowly, a kind of peace settled in. I threw myself into my work, taking on a couple of big projects to keep my mind occupied. Every day felt more like I was getting back to who I used to be, before Marissa and all the lies. I even started reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen much of since things blew up. Aaron was always there, checking in, making sure I was actually enjoying my freedom and not just burying myself in work. Then one evening, he convinced me to go out. "Just for a beer, man," he'd said. "It's about time you start living again." We ended up at a laid-back bar downtown, nothing too crazy. It felt good to unwind for the first time in ages, to laugh without feeling weighed down by everything that had happened. Somewhere between our second and third round, Aaron glanced over my shoulder, raising his eyebrows. "Well, would you look at that," he muttered, nodding toward the door. I turned, and there she was, Marissa, walking in with a couple of people from her work. She looked around, and for a second, her eyes locked on mine. The surprise on her face quickly shifted to something else. Regret, maybe? But I wasn't about to read into it. She gave a tight smile, probably expecting some kind of reaction from me. But all I did was nod in acknowledgement and turn back to Aaron, signaling the bartender for another drink. I could feel her watching, waiting for, I don't know what. For me to look back, maybe. Instead, I just laughed at something Aaron said and carried on. I didn't care what she thought anymore. She was just a part of my past, one that had no hold on me now. Eventually, she and her group moved to a table on the other side of the bar. I didn't look over once. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in a long time. I hadn't needed to say anything, hadn't needed some big dramatic confrontation. Marissa saw I was moving on, and that was that. It was like closing the final page of a book I'd been stuck reading for way too long. And in that moment, I knew I was finally free. A couple of weeks passed after that night at the bar. I was starting to build a new routine, one that felt like mine alone. Work was steady, and Aaron had practically made it his mission to keep me from falling into any kind of post-divorce slump. We went hiking, grabbed beers on weekends, and even booked a trip for a fishing weekend upstate. It felt like I was really living again. Then one evening, as I was settling in with a movie, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. I had a feeling it might be Marissa, but I didn't want to assume. I opened the message, and sure enough, it was her. "Lucas, please, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. In person. Just one last time." I sat there, rereading the message a few times, half of me tempted to just delete it. But a small part of me was curious. What more could she possibly have to say? After everything that had gone down, what more was there to explain? But something in me wanted to see this through, just to put any final ghosts to rest. I replied, "Fine. Tomorrow at 6. Cafe on Elm." The next day, I walked into the cafe a little before 6, feeling surprisingly calm. Marissa was already there, sitting at a small table in the corner, looking anxious. She glanced up as I walked over, managing a weak smile. I didn't sit. "What's this about, Marissa?" She looked down, playing with her hands, then finally met my eyes. "Lucas, I know you don't owe me anything, and I know I ruined everything. I've been going through a lot, and I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." She paused, like she was searching for the right words. I didn't understand how much I'd lose until it was gone. I stayed silent, watching her. She shifted in her seat, as if my silence made her more nervous. "Ryder's gone," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He ended things. Turns out he was seeing someone else the whole time. I've lost friends, my reputation, even my job's on the line. And now, I don't know what to do." There it was, the admission of regret, the acknowledgement of the consequences. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no satisfaction. She'd made her choices, and now she was dealing with the fallout. I crossed my arms. "You're telling me this because—" She looked up, and I could see a glimmer of desperation in her eyes. "Because I'm asking for your forgiveness, Lucas. I can't fix anything between us, I know that. But I just want you to know that I'm sorry, that I was wrong, and that I'd do anything to take it back." I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. For a long moment, we just sat there, her waiting for some kind of response. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady. "Marissa, I get that you're sorry. But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back, and it doesn't mean I can forget what you did. You threw everything we had away for someone who never cared about you. You made your choices. And now, you live with them." She blinked, as if the words stung, and nodded slowly. I could see the sadness in her face, the realization that I wasn't going to offer her a lifeline this time. I stood up. "Take care, Marissa. I really hope you find what you're looking for. But it's not going to be with me." With that, I walked out of the cafe, leaving her and the past behind, once and for all. It wasn't anger or satisfaction I felt, just a calm finality, like closing a door on a chapter that was meant to stay shut. Walking out of that cafe, I felt a kind of finality I hadn't expected. Marissa was finally out of my life, and for the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of her choices on my shoulders. The bitterness, the frustration, it was fading, leaving me with a blank slate. The next few weeks, I threw myself into every aspect of life I'd let fall aside. I hit the gym regularly, took up running again, and even started going out with friends more. Aaron was always pulling me along to something new, a concert, a weekend trip, even a painting class once, which I turned out to be laughably terrible at, but we had a good time. Slowly, I was rediscovering the parts of myself I hadn't realized I'd left behind. Then came an unexpected call from an old friend, Jamie. She'd been a colleague from back in the day when I was starting out as a civil engineer. We hadn't stayed close, but she'd heard about the divorce through a mutual friend and reached out. She asked if I'd be interested in doing some volunteer work on a community project she was managing, a local park renovation to create green space for underserved neighborhoods. I agreed without a second thought. Not only did it feel good to work on something meaningful, but it also reminded me why I got into this line of work in the first place. It was invigorating to work on a project that wasn't about profit margins or deadlines. There was something satisfying about seeing tangible results, knowing that this space would bring something positive to the community. One Saturday, as we wrapped up a day of work, Jamie invited me to grab coffee. We sat outside, watching the park come together in the early autumn sunlight. It was peaceful, and we laughed about old memories, swapped stories of the people we'd worked with, and slowly, the conversation turned a little more personal. "So you're really done with it all?" she asked, her voice gentle. "With everything that happened?" I nodded, looking out at the park. "Yeah, I am. It took a while, but I think I'm finally there. Letting go of all that resentment feels like lifting a weight I didn't know I was carrying." She smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "It suits you, Lucas. You seem lighter." There was something in the way she said it, a warmth that I hadn't expected. And for the first time, I felt myself open up to the idea of someone new. As the weeks went on, Jamie and I kept seeing each other, always with some excuse to check on the park. But eventually, it wasn't just about the park or the project anymore. We'd grab dinner, talk for hours, or just walk around the city, laughing at the simplest things. She became a bright spot in my life, something I hadn't thought I'd find so soon. One night, after a long day on site, she looked at me, her face soft in the fading light. "Lucas," she said, her voice quiet, "I know things have been complicated for you. But I just want you to know that I'm here, for whatever this is, or whatever it becomes." In that moment, I realized I was ready. Ready to let someone in, ready to move on for real, not just for show. I took her hand, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years, a kind of hope I hadn't thought was possible. And just like that, I knew I was on the path to something new, something real. The past was finally where it belonged, behind me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like my life was finally mine to live again. With Jamie, things felt natural, easy. There was no walking on eggshells, no buried resentments. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or wondering if there was something I was missing. We spent more time together, both on the park project and in those quiet moments afterward that somehow always stretched late into the night. One evening, we ended up at a small Italian place neither of us had been to before. The night was crisp, the kind that hinted at winter coming soon. The conversation flowed easily, laughter weaving through our stories and memories. At one point, she reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. It was a simple gesture, but it felt powerful, like some unspoken promise. After dinner, we walked through the park we'd been working on together, the same park that had, in some way, brought us together. The renovations were nearly complete, and the place was already buzzing with kids playing, families picnicking, and older couples taking evening strolls. Seeing it all come together like this, something we'd both put so much time into, felt oddly fulfilling. Jamie stopped, looking out at the playground, a soft smile on her face. "You know, this is exactly how I pictured it turning out. I just didn't picture you being here with me," she said, her eyes meeting mine. I felt a warmth in my chest that had been missing for too long. "Funny thing," I replied, "neither did I. But I'm glad we're here together." Without another word, she leaned in, and we shared our first real kiss. It wasn't just a kiss though, it was like a quiet promise, a beginning. I hadn't felt this kind of connection in years, and part of me almost couldn't believe it was real. From that night, Jamie and I fell into a rhythm that felt like it had always been there, waiting to be picked up. Weekends were spent hiking, trying out new places to eat, and working on small projects around the city. She was a lot like me, focused, driven, but grounded in a way I hadn't realized I needed. As we grew closer, she never pressured me to share about my past with Marissa. But one night, over a late dinner, I felt ready. I told her everything, from the affair to the divorce, to those hollow months after when I tried to rebuild what was left. She listened without interrupting, her hand on mine, her gaze steady. When I finally finished, she looked at me with a soft understanding that didn't need words. "I'm not Marissa, Lucas," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, I realized something important. Trust was possible again. I hadn't even known how much I needed to hear those words. Jamie wasn't just someone I was dating. She was someone I trusted, someone I wanted in my life for real. With her, the past felt truly behind me. It was like I'd finally turned the last page of a book I'd been trapped in for too long. Jamie was my next chapter, and for the first time, I was ready to start writing it. Life with Jamie was a breath of fresh air, something I hadn't realized I'd needed this badly. We settled into an unspoken rhythm, a comforting blend of routines and surprises. She had a way of making the ordinary feel significant. A Sunday morning coffee turned into hours of laughter and storytelling. A walk in the park became an impromptu picnic. Every moment felt like we were building something real, layer by layer. One weekend, she invited me to her family's cabin in the mountains. She talked about it like it was her favorite place on earth, a small log cabin her dad had built himself. It was tucked away by a lake, surrounded by trees that seemed to reach up and blend into the sky. The place felt quiet, secluded, a world away from everything. When we got there, she looked so at home, so comfortable and free, that I felt myself letting go in a way I hadn't in years. We spent the weekend hiking trails she knew by heart, cooking dinners over the fire, and watching the stars from the cabin porch. The first night, wrapped up in blankets, she pointed out constellations, telling me stories from her childhood, little pieces of herself she hadn't shared before. Her voice was soft, her gaze focused on the stars, but every so often she'd glance at me with this warmth in her eyes, and I'd feel like the luckiest man alive. Then, as we sat there in the dark, she turned to me, a serious look in her eyes. "Lucas," she started, her voice barely a whisper, I know we've both been through a lot to get here. I know things haven't been easy. But being with you right here, right now, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Hearing her say it, especially with all that we'd both gone through, hit me like a wave. I felt the same. With Jamie, I wasn't just healing, I was living in a way that felt grounded and steady. "I feel the same way, Jamie," I replied, taking her hand. "This is the first time in a long time that I don't feel like I'm running from anything. With you, I feel like I'm actually moving forward." She squeezed my hand, a gentle smile crossing her face. We stayed like that for a long while, wrapped up in each other, the stars, and the quiet of the mountains. When we left the cabin, heading back to the city, there was a new closeness between us. It wasn't just a relationship anymore, it was a partnership, something I could see stretching out into the future. It was like every step we'd taken had been leading here, to this simple steady happiness I hadn't known I was missing. From that weekend on, everything felt more certain. With Jamie, it was no longer about healing or moving on, it was about building something entirely new. And for the first time, I could see a future that wasn't about what I'd lost, but about what I'd gained, and who I wanted by my side as I kept moving forward. As the weeks turned into months, Jamie and I fell into a life together that was simple and effortless, yet somehow more fulfilling than anything I'd known. We made space for each other, in our homes, in our routines, and even in our plans. It didn't feel rushed, but rather like two people moving at the same pace, finally on the same path. One weekend, Jamie suggested a road trip out to the coast, something she knew I'd been meaning to do. It was last minute, just bags tossed into the car and a full tank of gas. She had her feet up on the dashboard, singing along to songs on the radio, laughing each time she got the lyrics wrong. With the wind in her hair, Jamie looked completely free. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a happiness that didn't need any explanation. When we reached the coast, we found a quiet stretch of beach, watching the waves as the sun began to set, painting the sky in deep colors of orange and violet. Jamie nestled close, leaning her head on my shoulder, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, a peaceful quiet where just being was enough. Then, out of nowhere, she spoke up, her voice soft but serious. "Do you ever think about what's next for us, Lucas?" I glanced down at her, surprised, but feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "Yeah," I replied, feeling each word as I said it. "I think about it all the time. And Jamie, I want you in it, every part of it." A small smile crept onto her face, her eyes reflecting the fading light of the sunset. "I'd like that too," she whispered, reaching for my hand, intertwining our fingers. We sat there in the sand until the last sliver of sunlight disappeared over the horizon, the cool night air settling in around us. I realized then that the life we'd started to build wasn't just a rebound from the past. This was real, and the future I wanted was standing right there beside me. That night, over a dinner of fresh seafood and wine at a little beachside restaurant, we talked about our dreams, our plans, all the things we hadn't thought to share before. She talked about her love for nature and hinted at wanting to settle somewhere quiet, maybe even have a family someday. And for the first time, the thought didn't scare me, it felt like something I wanted too. As we drove back that weekend, the miles rolling under us, we talked about finding a place together, making a home that was ours alone. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something I was cautiously walking toward. With Jamie beside me, it felt wide open, full of possibility, and completely within reach. There was a peace in that realization. A real, honest peace that had nothing to do with the past or anything I'd been through before. It was about where I was headed, and who I wanted beside me every step of the way.